friendly reminder to everyone, please make sure that your mic is off during the webinar. Thank you for your cooperation. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the English Language Department from Institute of Teacher Education Islamic Education's campus, I would like to extend my warm welcome to all the guests to today's webinar. Yang Berusaha, Miss Aileen Jessie Ahguan, our invited speaker, respected lecturers of Institute of Teacher Education Islamic Education campus, and my dear students. We will start our program with a prayer recitation. Please welcome Muhammad Burhanuddin Fahmi bin Nazri to lead the prayer recitation. Fahmi?
A'udzu billahi minasyaitonir rajim. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. In the name of Allah, the most gracious, the most merciful. Praise be to Allah, the Lord of the universe. Let your blessings and your peace be upon your servants and your messenger, Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, his family and his companions. On this glorious afternoon, and in conjunction with our CEFR awareness workshop, we raise our hand to pray gratefully and to thank you on your infinite favor, that we could live in peace and harmony, and to perform our duties as your servants. Oh Allah, we ask for your blessings to make this occasion a success. You are the mercy of all mercies, and you are the Lord of the universe. Give us mercy from your presence, and let us do the right conducts in our plight. We ask of you knowledge which is beneficial, and sustenance which is good, and deeds which are acceptable. Oh Allah, help us to remember you, to thank you, and to worship you in the best of manners. Forgive us, have mercy upon us, give us strength, and grant us sustenance. Oh Allah, we ask of you that this CEFR awareness workshop will attain the objectives as planned, to acquire positive values through active participation in the workshop, and to develop exemplary qualities appropriate for us as the future teachers in Malaysia. Oh Allah, we seek refuge in you from false testimony, or committing immorality, or provoking you. And we seek refuge in you from the malice of the enemies, and from enigmatic diseases, and from the despair of hope. Oh Allah, bless our CEFR awareness workshop and fill it with barakah. Forgive us of all the wrongdoings that we may do throughout this workshop. All these are in your mercy. So now we raise our hands and beseech upon you to accept all our efforts in this workshop as good deeds. Give us good in this world and good in the hereafter, and save us from the torment of hellfire. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina azaban nar. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammadin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin. Amin.
Amin, amin, ya Rabbil Alameen. Thank you, Fahmi. Ladies and gentlemen, for your information, this webinar is one of the MBI programs. The main objective of this webinar is to share information on CEFR, which stands for Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. So I know that the students are not exposed to this information yet. Okay, so please listen carefully. Okay, which will be shared by Miss Aileen. All right. And how does CFR link to our current English language curriculum in the primary school? And there will be a question and answer session towards the end of this program. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to introduce Miss Aileen Jessie Ahguan, our guest speaker for today. Miss Aileen is from Kuching, Sarawak. She graduated from University of North Texas, USA, with Bachelor of Art in English, and received her Master of Education in Educational Management and Language Teaching from University of Bristol, UK. She had experience as an English language teacher in Sarawak and also as curriculum supervisor at PPD Kuching. Currently, she is staying in Sungai Pelik, Sepang, and working at Curriculum Development Division, okay, known as a BPK, in the Ministry of Education Malaysia as the Principal Assistant Director and Head of the English Language Unit. Prior to that, she was the Assistant Director at the same place for more than 10 years. So I'm sure she has a lot to share with us. So without further ado, let's welcome Miss Aileen to give her talk on CFR awareness in the classroom. Okay, allow me to share the presentation, yeah?
Thank you very much, Yang Mulia. Sorry, let me get your name correctly. Yang Mulia Raja Zaida. Yes, Zaida. Okay. I am truly, truly honored indeed to receive this invitation because it is actually very timely for BPK to engage with future teachers, right? Future teachers of our nation, and also to share what curriculum development is currently involved in. Before I start my presentation, I think my experience working in KPM truly has enriched actually my overall experience as an educator in the country. I have very short teaching experience, only 12 years. And unlike you who are present today, I do not or don't have any primary teaching experience because I've always been a secondary school English language teacher, and then then I got involved in management all the way until today. So I think during the Q&A, I would love to get your thoughts. So I would like this session to be very interactive, or rather, let's just say, I hope that it's going to be a two-way communication between us. Yeah, and I don't claim to be an expert, but what I have and what I know, I will share with you. And I'm just a bit disappointed that we are not able to see each other physically, face to face, because I feel that when we have this kind of sessions, it's more beneficial when we are able to interact physically. But anyway, this is the new norm, so we'll just have to get on with it. All right, so it's the title given to me today for this 2-hour session, but we'll see how long it takes us. Okay, first of all, I think I'm not able to know who are here, except that I was told that you are mostly TESOL students in probably the 5th or 6th semester, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong, and as well as lecturers. And I assume that the lecturers are from the same campus, I believe. Okay, but anyway, welcome to my session. So I'm glad that all of you are here today. And right, so can we move to the second slide? Yes, right. I always like to open a discussion or what they call a presentation with, trying to think a little bit. I know it's not that time of day. It's 2:40, and it's not the time that you want to think and dig deep into your thoughts. But I think it would get us going in terms of listening to this presentation. When you think about what we have ahead of us, right? You as future teachers, you, I'm sure, will have to think about what you are going to expect when you graduate. What you learn in the classroom, right, and what you deliver later on in the classroom may be influenced by the changes and the challenges ahead, right? So you can ask yourself, what are the changes that you see today, and what are the changes that you see down the road later on. I, as a curriculum developer, I will have to think about that all the time. When we develop the curriculum, we have to think about what is ahead, not what is currently in front of us at the moment. I mean, not literally in front of us, but what we're currently facing is not enough. We have to look ahead much, much further, because you are going to be teaching the future in your case, right? So you have to prepare yourself, right? So you have to prepare yourself to meet these challenges, and well, first comes the changes, and then with that comes the challenges as well, right? So I mean, I don't have to list out all the changes. I'm sure that you know, in your discussion in your lectures and all that, you do talk about and you do discuss, I'm sure, what are the changes and what are these challenges. But you know, just to give just maybe one or two examples. For example, we said changes, right? When you talk about changes, it does not necessarily have to be changes related to education, because everything is interrelated. For example, if you talk about changes in the way we communicate, right? Changes in how we teach and how we learn, right? Changes in the type of jobs that we have. When we say changes, means between what was then during our parents' time, what we have now, and what we have in the future. So things are always evolving. So that's change. So so jobs, work, education, lifestyles, that's going to change. And how is it going to affect us as an educator, right? So we have to prepare ourselves. We cannot just depend on what knowledge we have today. So we have to keep educating ourselves. And with these changes, as I said, there are the challenges, right? Right. Challenges now with the change, it will affect relationships. For example, communication, right? The change in communication is, you can say, is fast. How we communicate with each other then, you may have to use a payphone or a landline at home. Now you communicate through smartphones and all that, and you don't even have to see each other, right, face to face. You can exchange and communicate. Now, because of that change, what is the challenge that we have today? It's disrupting relationship with people because of the way we communicate. Therefore, it affects the relationship between people because we are no more physically having to be in front of them when we communicate, and everybody is just looking at their devices. For example, they're communicating, but they are not responding to each other in a human way, you know. So because people, you can see that they're like robots, you know, they just look at their devices and all that. So that's an example of change and challenge, right? And of course, another example I just very quickly give would be like today, because of what's happening around the world, therefore we have to learn and we have to teach in a very different way. Maybe yes, 2 years, 3 years ago, we never thought that we will spend so much time looking at a you know, a 2 foot by a 1.5 foot screen in front of you, staring at it. Most of the time in the day, you spend looking at it rather than you spend with your loved ones or looking at them, right? So because of that change, so it's also challenging us in terms of the quality of the education that we're receiving, right? Do you think it affects the quality when we have to hear lectures, hear presentations done remotely like this, right? Through virtual world and all that. So it is a challenge when we question the quality of the education that we're receiving. Okay, but we're not saying that through this new way of learning that education is compromised. We're not saying that, right? Of course, there are ways that we can maximize the way that we're doing things differently. But if I look at schools today and teachers who may not have the advantage of having all the technology, that's where education or quality of education is compromised, right? Okay, next slide, please. So the topic that's given to me today is CFR awareness in a classroom. So I was challenged. When I was given this topic because I do not know how much of CFR the audience know or the viewers here know. I was told by Yang Mulia herself that she attended a course conducted by BPK some years back, right? Yang Mulia? Okay. And but I do not know to what extent when we say, yes, I know what is this CFR, is it just that I know what it refers to, or do you know what it is actually, right? So if you look at the screen, I'm not sure, it looks a bit small, but I think all of you can see. Right, what I have on the screen here basically is one way of looking at your understanding of what is CFR. Okay, of course you have to know exactly what the acronym means. Okay, which I think the moderator just now has given you the translation, or not translation, the meaning of CFR, which is the Common European Framework of Reference for Languages. And then you have learning, teaching, and assessment. So that's the full version of CFR. Okay, so it's a framework, and it is a framework used for learning, for teaching, and for assessment. So that's what it means. There are three areas that we use CFR for. Now, if you see on the screen, when we started this project with Cambridge way back in 2016, we have a little bit of knowledge about CFR. We had a little bit of knowledge, but we did not know to what or how much of CFR is being used in the world, right? And let alone in Malaysia, even in the world at that time, we do not know how many countries are using or are familiar or are aware of it, right? So back in 2016, we had very little knowledge about CFR, okay? And we had that blue book. If you see on the left of the screen, that blue book is the first publication of the book, right? Which the European Council, right? They were made up of many members, but because it involves all the countries in Europe, but not all the members were part of the project at that time, right? So when they started the project back in late 20th century at that time, I think was 1989 or 1999, that kind of age of year, they were involved in a project because they realized that they were quite diversified in terms of languages where Europe is concerned. So they felt that they had to have something that need to that they need to have a common reference, right? So that's why they came together, and then they deliberated for many years, and finally they came up with this framework, and then they published in 2001. All right, and then this framework then is used throughout for many years until they realized that 17 years later, in 2018, they have to revise the version that they originally had, because language is dynamic. It changes, right? It changes. So they realized that we need to do change. We cannot be using the same framework, just like curriculum, right? We change it every 10 years or so. So the same thing with this framework. And so they came up with a version in 2018. So this 2018 version is an improvement, or it complements the first version. It does not mean that you throw out the first one, right? So they use it together because this is where they fall back on the original version, then they improve on it. Then they come up with another version in 2020, and then for each version, there's an aspect which they improved on. Okay, so since I was made aware that from the beginning, maybe you have not much information on CFR, none at all, or a bit of none.
Yeah,
okay,
the students are not exposed to CFR yet.
Not exposed. Okay, all right. Okay, so what is this framework all about? Okay, very briefly. Okay, now this as I said, is a framework. It is not a syllabus. It is not a book that you can just open up and say, okay, I want to plan a lesson, therefore I will look at this book. So it's nothing like that. A framework basically just describes what are the it's okay. It's kind of like a manual, if you want. If you want to make an analogy, it's kind of like a manual, but it is open to different ways of applying that knowledge in your context. That means if Malaysia wants to adopt this framework, they do not have to take everything from that framework to use it in their country, right? Because it is just a guideline to say you can do this, you can do that, but it's up to you how you want to adopt it. All right. So now back to what this framework consists of. Firstly, there are 3 dimensions. All right, this is the term that they use. So I've already extracted some information from it. So after this, you can all rush to the website and read up on what this framework is about. Okay, so I've extracted for you what this CFR blue book, right? Initially, the blue book came about. So there are basically 3 dimensions or 3 areas, right, that CFR focus on. The first one, they talk about language activities. So if you look at the framework, you open up the pages, you are going to be looking at how they describe the language skills. Okay, so you have in there, they'll talk about the language activities in terms of listening and speaking, in terms of writing, in terms of reading. But in this framework, they go more deeply into just the 4 skills. For each skill, they further break it down to reception, production, interaction, and mediation. Right. So this is where, you know, they make things a bit more complicated. So that's why it can suit any context, right? So that means that if your curriculum is teaching about the 4 main skills of languages, you can further break down each skill to make it more refined so that it can suit the purpose of every learner in the country. Okay, that's what we realize when you read this, when you look at the framework. So the first dimension, they will describe the language activities, which basically relates to the skills. Then the second dimension of the CFR, they talk about domains. Domains are probably equivalent to something like context, right? A domain can be maybe similar to like the context. So that means when you teach, for example, if you're teaching, right, you're planning a lesson and you want to teach about environment, for example. Okay, so environment can be your theme, can be your topic, but that environment is further categorized into a bigger category where it falls into what they call domain. So environment can fall into many types of domains. So in the CFR, they have stipulated the 4 domains. Okay, very wide. First domain, educational. All right. So this so again, we said just now it's something like context. So the first domain, they talk about educational domain. Then they talk about occupational domain. Then they have public domain and personal domain. Okay. So if you open the blue book, you know, you can look at the soft copy version of it. You look under the topic of domains, and then you read out what each domain refers to. All right. So they explain the framework in terms of activities just now, domains, and thirdly, competencies. That's where the crux of this CFR is, competencies. Competencies basically just relate to what you can do. That means your ability, right? Are you competent in reading, speaking, listening, writing, for example? How competent are you when people ask you that? That means how able are you to carry out that skill or to do that activity. So in the CFR, they describe competencies, and how competent a learner is, they grade it according to 6 levels, right? So they start from the lowest, which is A1, and then you have B2, and then B1, B2, and all that. So later on we'll see in the furthest in the next few slides. But generally, the CFR consists of these 3 dimensions, which I talk about, right? And in 2018, they improved the original framework. Why did they improve the original framework? Because they felt that as they move as they advance into the 21st century, there are many new development that is happening around the world. So they feel that this framework needs to take into account all those new things that's emerging. For example, what did they change? Okay, they added new descriptors, right? Descriptors, just hold your thoughts if you're asking what is the meaning of descriptor, okay? So just bear in mind that these descriptors later on I will explain, right? So they have added new descriptors, and what do they add to this 2018 version? They even have competencies, or rather they even tell how to rate a learner based on their online interaction. So this is something new which we do not think of years back. If the learner is able to perform or interact online, you are now able to tell whether the child is very competent as an online interactor or not, right? So that is how important they see this new change that's happening around the world. That means in 2018, you can now not just evaluate a learner or a child based on the conventional reading, writing skills, but through the new technologies they are using. So you can also now evaluate them, okay? Because right now with online and all that, so we can now evaluate our learners, right, through these competencies. So it's very interesting. If you want to go further into it, please pick up a book and then read the 2018 version, okay? And then they also do further changes to it, like they've refined the 6 levels, okay? And they've added more descriptors to make it more enriching. So then in 2020, 2 years later, they come up again with further improvements to it. And this time they added, they refined it further by putting in a different kind of competence, not just reading, speaking, listening, and writing, but they included things like plurilingual. For example, if there are any lecturers who actually lecture on linguistics or social linguistics, you may come across such terms, right? Plurilingual, pluricultural competence. Right? So Malaysia may not be ready for this yet. I think we'll just stick to listening, speaking, reading, writing, and maybe in years ahead we may want to adopt this and see, should we base our child's competence on such domains or such skills, right? So something for our future educators to think about. Maybe some of you may want to do a research into it and then see whether we can improve on our curriculum. Okay, so on the screen as well, before we move to the next slide, you can see on the bottom left of the screen, these are the 6 levels as I was telling you earlier on. We have the lowest level, which is A1, and then we have, of course, native speaker compatibility, which is C2. So if you're a C2, you are equivalent to a native speaker. That's how the ratings go. And I just want to highlight that red box. If you can see that it's red. So basically what this table shows on the bottom left is that these are the recommended hours to meet if you want to achieve the different levels. Okay, so if you can see on the in the middle of the screen, there's the levels, and then on the left of the table, you can see English, Cambridge English. So that is the body that actually recommends or rather prescribe the number of hours to meet. If let's say you want to achieve A1, okay, for English, okay, well, I do not know why they start with at A2, but for English, or maybe A1 and A2, the number of hours to meet is that you must have at least 180 to 200 hours of, these hours here refer to learning hours, right? Or contact hours, they call it, right? Contact hours. So if you have 200 contact hours, they are saying that the child is able to be at least in A1 or A2 CEFR level. So anyway, these are just recommendations, but I thought it was interesting to share, because if you look at our curriculum, right? If you look at our curriculum for primary, you have 6 years, right? You have 6 years of primary education for our primary school children. And if by the end of year 6, we say that we want them to be at A2, right? Let's say, for example, we want them to be at A2 at the end of year 6. So we have to make sure that by the end of year 2 or year 6, we should have at least 200 contact hours in our teaching for our children. So that's what CELA is telling you. Cambridge English Language Assessment is telling you that to achieve at these levels, you must have that number of contact hours. Okay, so this is a rough guide. And we did a rough calculation. Our contact hours for English in schools are more than that. Right? So we are safe. Right? We are safe, but unfortunately, even after 200 contact hours, some of our kids are still not able to be at A2 level. So that's the scenario. Okay. So this table, again, as I said, is used by the European Council, and they use it for students in Europe, and of course for other countries in the world as well. Okay, that's how they develop it. Okay, moving on next. All right. Before I go on, I think I have until 4, is it? Or is it until 4?
Until 4:15.
4:15. Okay.
Here we have question and a Q&A.
Okay, so I should not make it too long then for my brief. So, all right, now that we have a little bit of understanding on what CFR is and all that, why do we have to use CFR? Or why are we suddenly now wanting to adopt this CFR, right? Now, our country is going through reform in in many aspects, right? For example, in education, because we are just concerned with education. Education itself, also, we are going through reform in some ways. But English language education is going through a massive reform. A reform here basically just means a big change, right? A big change. Change for the better. Most of the time when we reform something, we want it to be better. So English language education in the country is going through reform. And the first document that we based this reform on is on the roadmap. I think all of you are familiar with the English language education roadmap. Right? It's green in color. Okay, so it should not go unnoticed. But if you look at the content, right, it's quite a thick book, so it might take a few days for you to go read it back to back the pages. But it's a very comprehensive document which tells you how you reform English language education in the country from preschool all the way to teacher education level, or even up to tertiary and university. So that's how comprehensive it is, and they are all in a systematic and in a systemic way. The reform takes place. So it's not kind of a one-off and one piece. They call it, you do change and then you don't look at other aspects of it, so things may not be sustainable. So in this roadmap, right, because it is quite comprehensive and systematic kind of reform, so we believe that it will take us to where we want to be in 10 years' time, because it started in 2015, right, the roadmap, the reform. So 2015 we started, today we are in 2021, so it's already 6 years, and we have 4 more years to go. So if you're interested to know what's going to happen, right, look in the roadmap and see what we're supposed to achieve at the end of 2025. Now, the roadmap does not work on its own, right? We have to align it also to the blueprint, which we call the Plan Pembangunan Pendidikan Malaysia, PPPM, or Malaysian Education Blueprint, right? Because the Malaysian Education Blueprint, it talks about education in Malaysia in general. English is mentioned in there, but it is not comprehensive. So that's where the roadmap comes in. But they must work hand in hand and they must complement each other, because at the end of the day, the outcome that we want to achieve is the same, right? To have the well-balanced child at the end of the day, at the end of what we want to achieve in education, right? So you see, we are in tandem with what is aspired in the documents, right? So we have to make sure that we work in tandem with what is aspired, right? So that in a nutshell is what the English language education reform is about, right? In terms of the document. Okay, next slide, please. Right. The reform process, of course, we are not going into the technical part of it, but it is actually led by English Language Teaching Center, ELTC. They are the body which acts as the secretariat for this whole reform process, and the experts that actually move this whole reform process is the English Language Council, all right, or what we call the ELSQC. So they are the body of experts working together with the Secretariat in ELTC to make sure that everything is carried out as per stipulated in the roadmap. Okay, so what is this process? It is a comprehensive review process. So we have to evaluate everything to do with English language education in the country. You look at teaching, you look at learning, you look at assessment, and you look at materials or resources. So all this will come under purview in the reformation process. Okay, you can't just be looking at teaching, you have to look at learning. Yeah, when you can't have teaching and learning without resources. Okay, so you have to look at that. And then you must have delivery, because delivery in terms of how the teachers deliver the curriculum and all that. So that must also be looked at together. All right, so that's the reformation process. Then you have the implementation process, where to do the reform, right, you have to produce a guideline. So the guideline is the roadmap, right? And this is where CEFR comes in, because we want to have our educations, or our English language education, okay, we want to have our English language education to be at par at the international level. So when we say at par, so we have a standard that we want to benchmark to, right? So that standard is the CFR, right? So that's why we have to equip ourselves with understanding what the CFR is, because we are benchmarking against the CFR in terms of the standards that we want to achieve, right? English language standards rather, right? And so we set our targets for our curriculum based on the CFR levels, which I mentioned just now, right? And then, of course, the process ends with implementing it later on, the changes, and then we have to monitor all the changes that we do. So it's a long process. It doesn't happen overnight. Okay, so well, we started in 2015, and we hope to see some results in 2025. We hope. Okay, next slide. Right. So, what kind of standards do we want? Right. We want to have we want to benchmark English language standards in the country to an international standard, but first of all, we must understand what is that international standard that we want to benchmark to. Let's go back a little bit to 2013, right? Because to make change, you must start from somewhere, right? You want to, when you make a change, you want to get from A to B, but you must understand what that A is first, because from A, then you get to B, right? So you have to know what you want to improve. So back in 2013, all right, there was a study done, and this study was commissioned to a international body. Okay, it's not done by ministry, but of course in collaboration with the ministry. So we have at that time we call it the Cambridge Baseline Study, and was done by Cambridge University of Cambridge. And the baseline study results, as you can see on the screen on the left, okay? So this baseline results is very significant to our reformation or our reform process, because firstly, it tells us where we are in terms of English language standards. So from the study, all right, they have quite a big sample at that time, and the sample was made up of pupils from preschool all the way to university, I think. I don't know, to Form 5, they said here. That means preschool, primary, and secondary. And then there were teachers involved in the study. Okay, so there were samples. And so from the results, they found out that for preschoolers, all right, 16% were at A1. All right, so maybe some of you are asking, what is an A1? Right? What is an A2 and all that. So it's okay. For now, you know that there are 6 levels in the CFR, right? So A1 and A2 are basically the basic level. They call it the basic level. Then you have the intermediate level, which is B. So you have B1 and B2. And then from intermediate level, you have the proficient level, which is like the native speaker kind of proficiency. So that would be at C. Now, if you look at the results from the baseline study, right, we can generally say that our primary students or pupils are at A2 generally, and only 22% are at E2, and that's the best. When they put there A2, 22% means that probably you will not have those kids in the 22%. Well, I think in the baseline study, from how the results go, they were quite concerned that in the sample, right, 22% of pupils who were at year 6 are only at A2. Okay, and even less are at B1, and even far less are at B2. Right, so that is those were just results, and at that time we couldn't really see. Okay, so you have 22% at A2. So what? You know, back then, because we couldn't see the we couldn't see the reasoning why it was such, that's the scenario at that time. So let's just understand it for now, the results as what the study showed. So for Form 3, 17% were at B1, 26% at B1 for Form 5 and so on. All right. So, so based on the baseline results in 2013, the country wanted to do a reform for English, right? So in 2015, the roadmap was produced. And this roadmap looked at the results of the baseline study. And they said, okay, based on that baseline study, we have to now set some targets for our country, for our students. So based on that, we set the target in the roadmap saying that by 2025, right, preschool pupils should be at A1. We don't say how many, but we said preschool pupils English level should be at A1. Year 6 will be A2, Form 3 B1, and so on for Form 5. Okay, so that is the aspirational targets. That means we have not achieved it yet, but this is what we aspire in these 10 years that we want to achieve. And third column shows you what the curriculum targets are. Now, why do we have curriculum targets? Because the schools use the national curriculum, and the national curriculum is the one that we use in our classrooms, obviously, from BPK, right, from here. So we have to make sure that in order to achieve the aspirational targets, we have to make sure that our curriculum is aligned to these targets as well, aligned in terms of the standards, right? So that's where we work with Cambridge English to make sure that our curriculum, right, the curriculum that we develop, right, is in line with the targets that we have set. Okay, so that's why we have the curriculum targets from preschool all the way to Form 5. Okay, but if you look at the scales, right, we have working towards A1, and then we have A1 low, A1 mid, A1 high, and so on, right, until B1 high. So this was based again on the 2001 framework. This was based on the 2001 framework, right? Remember that blue book? That is the framework that we used, or rather Cambridge used to align our curriculum. Okay, so I also have included a scale which we call the global scale, just for comparison. All right, because this global scale is used by users of languages in Europe, including English, all right, throughout the world. Okay, those to adopt, there are more than 80 countries, I think, adopting CFR now. And they do refer to the global scale, because this global scale means it's used internationally. However, in Malaysia, currently in our curriculum document, we do not use the global scale per se. So what Cambridge has done is we have scaled the global scale to suit the context of Malaysia. And the descriptors have also been recalibrated so that it adopts the essence of the CFR, but the scale itself has been further sliced, if you want to call it, further sliced because from the study that was done in 2013 and from the roadmap targets, we found that we cannot set our curriculum targets based solely on the global scale. If that is the case, then it would be quite difficult for us to break it down to 6 years in primary and the 5 years in secondary. You see what I mean? Because the highest that we can go to for secondary is a B1. if you look at the global scale, a B1 is only the third level in that 6. So if you only have 3 levels based on the global scale, how are you going to further divide that into the 5 years or the 6 years in primary, you see? So Cambridge worked out a way so that they are able to help us to align the curriculum to the scale by going through that process, okay, where they slice it using where each level is further sliced to low, mid, and high. All right. So you can see now that for the primary, right, year one, the level that we set for year one is not even A1, right? Because for year one, we have a different context of pupils when they start primary. Some of them have no preschool experience. I mean, these were some of the factors that explain why our year one pupils, in terms of English language, they were not at that level. Some of them were struggling, right? And so these are we're talking about general, in general, the year one pupils. So, so that's why when Cambridge English look at our results and look at our curriculum, they found out that the curriculum that we used to use was way high, too high for them, right? So that's why we have set such curriculum targets, right? So I think that's all I want to say about the curriculum targets, but at least you have an understanding now in comparison to why we set the targets in such a way and how it compares to the global scale. Okay, moving on. Right. So this is what I mean by the global scale. So if you read each, so the statements on the right, those are what you call the descriptors, because they describe, well, not really descriptors for the skills, but this global scale will, in the CFR, this global scale is later used for each of the 4 skills for language. That means for listening, speaking, reading, writing, you will have all the 6 levels as well. But this is the common scale. Yeah, for this is a common scale because it does not refer specifically to a particular skill. So if you say that a person is at A1, that means for listening, speaking, reading, writing, they are generally also at A1. Okay, so it refers to all the 4 or 5 skills across the board. All right, so this is the general scale. Okay, so okay, we move on to the next slides. Right, so why are we adopting the CFR? I think just now I'm repeating myself now, but just to reiterate that, firstly, we have to benchmark. If we want to have quality education recognized by at the international level, you have to benchmark. All right. So we have an established system that we are benchmarking our English language education. So why do we benchmark? Firstly, because we want to know how good our system is, right? So so that's how when we benchmark against a standard, then we know whether are we good or are we not. Okay. Number 2 is to compare how Malaysia is to international standards, right? So at least when you say that, oh, you are a B1, anywhere you go in the world, those who use CFR, they will know that, oh, okay, so they can relate to the standards because it is benchmark, you see, so they can relate to it, and it's also an international standard. And alignment is also part of the alignment process, where you bring the current standards in the country where English is concerned to the standards of at the international level. That's what I mean just now by benchmarking to international standards. All right, so this is the process that we go through to bring our English standards up, so that you'll be on par with other countries in the world. Okay, so can we move on to the next slides? All right, so this video which we are going to watch, it's about probably I don't see the time. I think it's about maybe 3 or 4 minutes, I think. So just sit back, relax, and see what you think about this video. Okay. Is there a sound for it?
Okay, no voice, no audio.
Yes, madam.
No, there's no audio coming up.
From the beginning?
Yes,
Yeah.
no
Okay.
audio from the beginning.
Okay, I'm sorry, but I don't know why my computer cannot be, the audio cannot be played. But okay, I just continue then.
My name is Muhammad Amin. He is 6 years old. When we can, we like to exercising every morning.
Can you hear now? Can you hear the dialogue now?
Yes, madam.
Yes,
Okay.
madam.
Yes, all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I repeat this one because it's quite interesting to listen to the answers by the students, especially since you're learning now, teaching of subject.
Yes. A panda because it's fluffy.
Yes, I love my family. I have one younger brother and one younger sister. Fried chicken. I do homework, play with my brothers and sisters, and go to the playground.
My father's name is Khairul Izwan. He is SPR officer. My mother's name is Azianti. He is teacher. My elder sister's name Ale Umaira. She is 13 years old. My little brother names Muhammad Amin. He is 6 years old. When we can, we like to exercising every morning.
I will, as a daughter, as a student, I will make my parents, my teachers proud this year. And I will try my level best to get straight A's. If I can't get straight A's, at least not fail any subject, because this year it's a very hard year this year. I will try my level best to get what my parents and my teachers want.
About my favorite musician, which is a Korean pop group called BTS. BTS has 7 members, and each members have their own specialty in music. For example, some of them are in charge of dancing, singing, or rapping. And one of the reasons I love them is because of their diverse music. They have a lot of hip hop, pop, and also R&B songs, and I love all of them.
After we were introduced with CEFR, we have more ideas on how to teach the kids and more ideas on fun activities that we can carry out in the classroom. And I find that the kids really enjoy doing the activities that have been laid out in the resources provided in the books, in the CDs as well, and even the videos.
Game of Thrones is a thrilling, epic, historical fantasy series that's just finally ended after being on air for 8 seasons. It's one of the most watched shows, and it has amassed millions of views for each episode thanks to its plot and character development. I personally generally enjoy watching the show thanks to its sublime cinematography. It is beautifully shot and features a lot of interesting footage because it features places of exotic places that I never thought that I would go, and now I feel like going there thanks to the show.
Right. So thank you for the short video. We had of course permission from the pupils and the teachers to make the video, and the reason why we created this video is sometimes it is very hard for us to visualize what each level actually sounds like. Okay, so we were told that, okay, come up with a video so that we are able to see how the different levels or levels of speakers we have, right? And you can see that from A1, right? Of course, for this we do not show the dissected levels. Basically, we just show for A1 and A2. So between A1 and A2, you have 3 years, because A1 would start with year 2, right? If you look at the what do you call that, target levels just now. So year 1 and year 2 and no, year 2, year 3, year 4, right? Those 3 years are actually set at A1. So if you look at the level that the sample just now for A1, right? So that is the level that our kids at the moment are at in terms of the target levels, because from the study that was shown, right, the majority of our kids are pitched at that level. Okay, right. You may have a handful which are better than that, all right? But we're talking about the masses here. Of course, you have those that are maybe in the areas of, you know, Kuala Lumpur, in the urban areas where definitely the English proficiency is way higher than that. Okay, and for A2, right, which was the boy that was talking about his favorite fried chicken. So for A2, we have target that level for year 5, year 6, and even up to Form 2. That is the level, right? So of course, there's only one sample, and A2's skills and capabilities also they have a range, right? So, but that was just one sample that we have, and then for B1, all right, we for our pupils up to secondary, we do not have any C levels, not even B2, all right? It is only set at B1 for Form 5. So B1 is the girl that was talking about, I think the father was an SPRM officer or something like that. But that is a level, right? So it's just to give you a rough idea. Right? It's just to give you a rough idea how each of the level would be like. Okay. Now, so when we decide to do this reformation of the English language education, we said, okay, now we want to benchmark to international standards. So what are we going to change? Right? What are the changes that we have to do to English language education? So we look at these few things. A, framework, right? What is a framework? So we need to also look at the framework of our English language in the country. So we have to look at curriculum, right? So we have to look at our curriculum and what is the framework going to be used in terms of teaching English language in the country. So we are now benchmarking to CEFR, therefore we have to look at the CEFR framework, right? And we have to align preschool, primary and secondary curriculum to that framework. Okay, so that's the first thing that we improve. Number 2, we also look at the curriculum content. And how it is laid out. So how do we organize the content? We organize it through the framework, through the syllabus, and we also provide the schemes of work. So that will be the organization of our content. Number 3, we look at the modular configuration of how we're going to teach English. So when we say modular configuration, of course, we look at all the 4 skills, plus we look at grammar and we look at language arts for primary, and for secondary we call it literature in action. So so that makes up the modular configuration. Then of course the grammar component of English language also is specified, but this time the grammar component is listed in the syllabus. So the syllabus is a part of the curriculum document. If you look at the DSKP or the curriculum document, it is found at the back of the that document. Okay, so it lists there what are the content that you need to cover in primary, secondary, and preschool. And then we talk about curriculum targets. So we have to set curriculum targets, right? So that we do things correctly, so that we are able to achieve the targets that we aspire. All right. Assessment. Now, of course, teaching and learning will always be complemented with assessment. All right. So you have when you teach, then you learn, then you assess. Then then in assessment, we also align the assessment performance standards, right? For formative assessment as well as for national examinations. We also look at the items that adhere to the framework for CFR as well. So it's all aligned to that standards at the end of the day. Then what we can say at the end of all this exercise, we have one national curriculum that is all aligned to each other. Okay, preschool is aligned to primary curriculum is aligned to preschool, and secondary is aligned, and then so on and so forth, all the way up to university. Okay, so everything is aligned. So we have one national curriculum framework which we follow. So we have one syllabus, and we have schemes of work which we create for primary, secondary, for primary and secondary. And then for primary, we have for the SK and the SJK schools. So this is basically, in a nutshell, what we have done, the changes that we're doing to curriculum to make sure that in this reformation process, we make things change it systematically. That's what we intend. Okay, next one. Right. So so how long does it take for us to change the curriculum? All right. Change, or what we say, align the curriculum. We started in 2016, all right, when we started to review the current curriculum at that time. We started to review it, and then from the review, we sat with Cambridge English and to come up with the content standards and the learning standards which make up the curriculum framework, right? So the curriculum framework basically is made up of the content standards, the learning standards, and the performance standards. So these three things. And then, of course, we have the syllabus, which maps out the content, right? And then the schemes of work, which you do your lesson plan based on the scheme of work, right? So for 2017, this is the timeline which we started with, all the way to 2022, when we will finally implement the Year 6 CFR aligned curriculum. Then next year, we will come to a full cycle of the aligned curriculum for primary level. Secondary, actually this year, we have completed the one cycle of the secondary CFR aligned curriculum. Okay, so it's just to give you an idea where we are now. All right, next. We have been talking about curriculum document. We're talking about framework. So how does each differ from one another, right? We start with the curriculum framework first. That is the map, if you want to call it, the map of the curriculum. All right, because the curriculum framework determines what you are going to cover for the 11 years of English language education in preschool all the way to secondary. Okay, so the curriculum framework maps it out, and then you can see a linear progression from preschool, how it progresses for all the skills, all the 4 skills across the board for primary all the way to end of secondary. And then the curriculum framework also maps out not only the linear progression, but also the depth of the content that you're going to cover. That means for each year, let's say in that one year of English language for year 1, for example, right? For year 1, the curriculum framework maps out how much the child should learn in 1 year of English language for year 1, and how deep you cover that content for year 1. So it progresses from how much they need to know and how deep they need to know, right? So if you look at the curriculum document, look at specifically the content standards, because the content standards will tell you what they should cover for the whole of primary, of the 6 primary years, and then the learning standards will tell you how much for each year the child should know. Okay, so that's the difference. So the curriculum framework is the overall. All right, then you have the second important thing here, which is the syllabus. The syllabus, as I said again, it is, I should start maybe with the DSKP. So from the curriculum framework, you have what we call the Document Standard Curriculum dan Pentafsiran, or DSKP. So the DSKP is your curriculum document. So when we say curriculum document, it refers to the DSKP. All right. So in the DSKP, it will include all the write-up about falsafah pendidikan, your values, what you need to have in your whole subject matter apart from the content. Yeah. So that document is very important actually. All right. It is your manual for your English language. So from the DSKP, in there you will find the curriculum framework, you will find the syllabus. So the syllabus is found at the back of the DSKP. So for each of that, it just tells you what the content of each one is. For example, the syllabus, it sets out what are the themes that you need to cover, what are the general topics, I suppose, grammar and vocabulary that the pupils will need to learn for each year in primary. All right, so that is all mentioned in the syllabus, and this syllabus is found in the back of the DSKP. And then the schemes of work is an additional document. All right, it is actually just a support or addition or a document that complements the DSKP, right? And in fact, some subjects do not have schemes of work. I think only English has it, because when we did the project with Cambridge, they felt that teachers need this support document, especially when they are still new with CFR. Okay, so that's why we created or developed the schemes of work with them. All right. Okay, so next, right. So this basically just this part of the presentation. I want to walk with you through the curriculum framework, because that's important in understanding what the CFR, how we align CFR, or how we align our curriculum to CFR. You need to understand what this framework is about. Okay, we have two documents. Okay, so one is the primary framework and one is the secondary. So all are available on the BPK portal, right? So, you know, you can download, you can print, you know, so we have made it available online for you. Okay, okay, next. When you open your DSKP, you will find in there, okay, I have an example here of the year 2. Okay, I don't know whether all of you refer to the DSKP in your studies, but the curriculum framework is found in the DSKP or the curriculum document. Okay, so sorry, the framework is not found in the DSKP. It's found on the website. Okay, which you saw just now. If you go back one slide. Yeah, this is the document. Right, from the framework document, then in the DSKP, we will just extract for that particular year. But this framework document that you see on the screen, it contains the content and learning standards for the whole 6 years of primary and the whole 5 years of secondary. So you can see all the content standards and learning standards for the 11 years that the child is in school. All right. So it's good that even though you are dealing with primary, you can also have a look at the secondary framework so that you will see the progression, right? How they progress from primary to secondary. Okay, next. So I just extract an example from the framework for primary, and I picked for year 3. I picked for year 3. So this is the end of what we call tahap 1, right? So so year 3 is an important year because it would determine whether the child is ready for moving on to year 4, 5, and 6. So let's look at year 3, and we look at 4.3, which is, okay, how do you read this curriculum framework? You start from the left, okay? And if you look at the subheading on the top, the content standards, right? The content standards here determines what the child will cover for the whole of the primary years. That means for 6 years, okay? So that is what we mean by content standards. The content standards determines what the child have to cover for the whole of their primary years. Then for listening, speaking, reading, and writing, it is coded by the numbers, as you can see on the top of that content standard, the example shown here, 4.3. How do you know what skill it is? Okay, listening skills always start with 1. So if you have 1.2, 1.1, 1.3, you know that 1 refers to listening. Speaking starts with a 2. So you have 2.1, 2.2, 2.3, that's for speaking. So reading is the next one. So listening, speaking, reading is a 3, and then 4 is writing. Okay, so 4.3, right? 4 is for writing, and under writing you have a few content standards. You have a few content standards. So they have 4.1, 4.2. Now, the example I'm going to show you is 4.3. Communicate with appropriate language, form, and style for a range of purposes in print and digital media. So this 4.3 will appear in all year 1 to year 6 content standards. It is the same because we said that, remember, content standards refer to what the child needs to master at the end of year 6, right? So the content standards is the same for all. What makes it different would be the learning standard. The learning standard would determine, just now I told you, the depth, right? That means how much of it do they need to know about 4.3. So, you see year 1, they have 4.3.3. Similarly, for year 2 until year 6, they have the same coding, 4.3.3. However, right, they all refer to the same content standards, which was 4.3. However, for each year in primary, what they study or what they learn for 4.3 is where it differs for each year. So for year 1, they learn how to plan and write words and phrases only. That is the level. Then for year 2, when they go up further, they have now gone deeper by adding simple sentences. So just now year 1 was just phrases. So now we go in year 2, they are expected to be able to produce simple sentences. Similarly, they go up to year 3. Now they are now progressing further. Not only simple sentences, but an increased range. Right? So they are now able to write different types of sentences. Okay? So it's not just simple, maybe they're able to use more adjectives and all that. So it gets a little bit more complex as they go up. Until if you see year 6, how complex the skill gets. Even though they are still referring to planning, drafting, and writing a simple draft for a writing exercise, but for year 6, you would expect the child to produce a more complex piece of writing compared to the year 1 child. But so this is the progression that you are able to see throughout the 6 years. All right, it's the same layout for all the skills. That's why the curriculum framework, you are able to see how the child progresses each year, right? For the different type of skills. So, so we move on. So this is for an example for year 3. Now I'm using the same content standards, and I am showing you now how the learning standards would look like for that content standards that we said earlier, yeah? Where we said content standards is the same for all the 6 years. The difference is in the learning standards. So for year 3, the learning standards, now you can see it clearly that it's stipulated, and then this is how it is written in the DSKP, right? You have the content standards, what is the focus, and what is the learning standards. So when you plan your lesson, right, you will have to think about activities that relate to 4.3.3, right? When you want the child to be able to write simple sentences, so your activities must relate directly to the learning standards. Okay, moving on. Okay, so this is just to make a comparison to how the global scale looks like. Do you remember what is the target level for year 3? Without going back to the slides, let's see if you remember. What is the target level that is set for year 3? Okay, the target that we set for year 3, if you look at the remember the 3 columns of the tables, where you have the baseline study, aspirational targets, and then the curriculum targets. Now, in the curriculum targets, we have set from year 1 until year 6, right, the different curriculum targets. So for year 3, it is set at A1 mid. Right, A1. It is within the range of A1, but that A1 has been further sliced into low, mid, and high. Right, so that's how we have set the curriculum targets. So in the global scale, there is no low, mid, and high. Right, it is just A1. So so what you can see here is that in countries that adopt fully the global scale, A1 for that writing skill that we were looking at, it would just be can write simple isolated phrases and sentences. So that would be how it looks like in a global scale. But in ours, how does it look like next? Okay, so because we have set A1 mid as the target level for year 3, so this is how what you would expect for the year 3 when you look at the this is for performance. Okay, this is the performance standards, right? And so when we look at the learning standards just now, right, you plan your lesson according to the learning standards. Now, when you assess the child, that means when you are teaching and you want to do assessment, for example, right? So this is the scale that you would use, which is found in your DSKP, right, to determine whether the child is at performance level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 6. So you look at the bullets and see which level your pupils will be at. So this is for for assessing or for assessment in the classroom. So assessment standards must go hand in hand with the learning standards. All right. So that's one thing that you need to bear in mind. Okay. So can you see the next slide? Okay. So again, performance standards, they we evaluate the pupils based on the learning standards, and in the performance standards there are 6 levels, and of course performance level 6 is the highest, or what we call tahap penguasaan. Tahap penguasaan, we have 1 all the way to 6. So if the child is at performance level 3, that is the minimum level that we want them to achieve, right? If the child is able to perform the learning standards according to what we have set out earlier on in the curriculum framework, if they are able to perform the skill, they are able to write at least a phrase or a sentence, that means they've already achieved it. So you give them a level 3. However, if you see that they are able to do more than that, even though they are still in year 3, but they are very proficient, therefore you can see level 4, 5, and 6. Maybe you can pitch them a little bit higher. So those are the descriptors here, right? That's what we mean by descriptors. So these descriptors will give you some idea about how good your pupils are in the class. So you base it on the descriptors. Okay, moving on. All right. So this is just, I'm almost to the end of my presentation. So I just want to inform that we have uploaded all our documents onto the portal, right? You can just Google bpk.gov.my, and then you have the menu at the top of the web page, and so you can see there that we have resources which we have uploaded for curriculum, and all things that I've been talking about just now will be found there. If you have problems, then later on I will give you my contact, and I can tell you how to access them, or I can tell Fan Raja here, then she can let you know. Okay, move on. So again, this is how the web page, the site looks like. So when you go into the portal, this will be the landing page, right? Then you can see that the menu where you want to go to is terbitan. So under menu terbitan, you choose which level you want, right, to access. So if you want DSKP for primary, then you will go to curriculum sekolah rendah. If you want to look at SOW, you go to bahan sokongan, right? Because curriculum will only have the document curriculum, right, which is the DSKP. But SOW is under sokongan. Okay, so it's under sokongan, so you will find under bahan sokongan. All right. Okay, next, moving on. Yes, it's raining very heavily outside, I think, going to. All right, so when you click onto the curriculum sekolah rendah or menengah, it will bring you to this kind of page, right? Of course, depending on what you click. Right? So this is for secondary. So you look for DSKP, KSSM, Bahasa Inggeris, tingkatan apa, or tahun berapa. Then you have SK, then you have SJK. Okay, so when you click, and then the whole document which I showed you just now, it will come out. Okay, next. Right, so I'm also informing you that besides the curriculum document, we also have the classroom assessment document, which we call the template pentaksiran bilik darjah, PBD. So this template, teachers will just download, and then they will fill in the assessment for their pupils when it's time for them to do assessment. All right, so this is all available in the website. So this is just a template, how it looks like. You can explore, right? You can explore, and then you see how the documents will look like. All right, so what else do we have until the end? Okay, so again, this will be useful when you're teaching. So you will have to fill in all this for your pupils in the class later on. Okay, so these are all based on the skills. So every skill will be evaluated separately. Listening, speaking, reading, writing. Right? So you will put the tahap penguasaan at the end once you have completed the evaluation for all the 4 skills. Okay, next one. Okay, so this will be the descriptors. Everything is automated. So once you click, it will. If you click a 3, automatically the statements will all come out. So we have made it in such a way that it's convenient, so the teachers do not have to type out the descriptors. If the child has attained level 3, for example, automatically the descriptors for level 3 will come out, right? So when the parents read the report card, they are able to see what the 3 means, right? So if the child reaches level 3 or level 4, so it will tell them, oh, the child is able to blah, 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 right? So the descriptors will show what it means. Okay, next one. Okay, this one was just what we mean just now by the descriptors. It will show up on the template automatically. Okay, next one. This one would be for the overall report card for the child. So it will show all the different subjects that he or she has and the level that she or he has attained. Okay, so this is more for the teacher's copy, right? So for the class teacher, she will have all the names of her students on the left, and then all the subjects and their scores or grades will be on the right. So this is a classroom report card. Next one. And then this would be the details for each of the results. It's probably equivalent to a transcript, right? So when you graduate, later on you will get a transcript, right? So the transcript basically will tell you for this paper, what grade did you get? And then it will give a brief description. If you get I don't know what's the scoring they use now. Is it A, B, C, or 1, 2, 3? I'm not sure, but the descriptors for the grades will inform what level or what you have achieved for your different papers that you have done for your course. Okay, next one. All right, so this is the overall. For this would be when they want to print out for teachers the evidence of the reporting. So it's basically a reporting for overall, what it means. Okay, when the child's report card is generated at the end. So all this is done through it's automatically generated through the template that is prepared. Okay, I think that one. Okay, then you can also show in the form of a graph. Okay, if they want to present it to the school committee or to the panel of to the school panel of parents, you can show in terms of a graphic form. Okay, and the last one is if you want to get in touch, then you can always email me. Okay, so I hope that what I have touched on may be just very superficial, just on the surface, but it will make you maybe want to read more on what CFR is. Okay, but I'm just trying to relate the CFR to the content of your course, so that when you get ready to go out into the classrooms, right, you will able to connect better. Okay, so I open for any kind of questions that you have. Okay, back to you, Yang Mulia.
Okay. Right, thank you very much, Miss Aileen, for the information which you have shared with us. So over here, at my place, raining heavily, okay, thunder and everything. All right, so I think what you have shared is very informative and useful for our students, because our students consist of SEM 1 and SEM 3. And for the SEM 3 students, this is the semester where they learn the courses of teaching off all the 4 skills. So they are familiar with the SKP and so on. All right, but as I said, we have not linked that the course to CFR per se. So this has shed light on them. Okay, what is the link of CFR to the school? Because what they know about CFR is that all teachers, English language teachers, need to achieve C1 to be posted. Okay, that's all they know about this. Okay, so my dear students, now is the question and answer session. If you want to ask any question, just raise your hand using the button, yeah? And then you can just ask your question. Okay, I open this to any questions. Nobody wants to ask question? You understand everything? Okay, Irfan. Okay, go ahead, Irfan.
Yes. If I may ask, so basically we have different levels of English proficiency and that we can grade through the A1, C1, C2, and so on. But I want to ask something based on the video that was presented earlier, the one that when asked students from standard 4, mainly primary school. And I was actually quite amazed to see that students of that standard, although they were at level A1 and A2, they had good English proficiency. But this is based on my own experience from primary school that most of my friends at that time in my classroom, they weren't able to speak much English in full proper sentence. So like maybe it's because due to the school being in rural area or a kampung school. So how do we grade based on of that? Like maybe students of that extent that they don't have that level of proficiency yet.
Okay, that's a good question. Thank you, Irfan. You'll be surprised to note that in fact what you said just now confirms one of the findings in the baseline study, which said that the weakest skill for Malaysian students back in 2013 during the baseline study was speaking and listening. So back to what you said just now, sometimes we are very quick to judge our pupils because if they are quiet or they just give you 1 or 2 word answers, immediately you label them as, oh, this child is very weak in English. But you might need to probe further to see that does that mean that he is weak only in the production skills, or is he just maybe not given the opportunity to communicate verbally or given the chance to speak more in the class? So sometimes this type of pupils, they may be good in writing, they may be good in reading, but their listening and speaking skills are the ones that they are still very weak at. So that's where, as a teacher, if you are very already familiar with what the different scales and the levels are, then you can see what are the signs that these children show in the class. If you find that they are very good in reading, very good in writing, but why is it that they don't want to open their mouth? Then maybe you have to ask yourself, oh, is it because they are not being given the opportunity, or the teacher does not focus on the listening and the speaking skill in the class? Most of the time teachers go in, they just like to do reading, they like to do writing, but they don't teach them the speaking skill, they don't teach them the listening skill. So that's why when these kids start to speak, they are very shy because they don't have they may not have the vocabulary, because that all needs practice. So this is a reminder to all of you that, when you go out later on to teach and all that, right, give equal weightage to all the 4 skills, right? I mean, when I was in school, listening skill was something that my teacher did not even teach at all, right? But we have to do ujian lisan. But during the teaching, she doesn't even teach us the proper listening skill, the proper speaking skill, right? So that is something that maybe is a reminder to all of us. So I don't know if I answered your questions, but that was a good point that you raised. Okay, thank you, Irfan.
Right. Thank you too. But I actually question very well, and if I may add a bit more,
I don't think it's because students aren't given the opportunity to speak English in the classroom, because in my school, English was we actually had a program that encouraged students to speak. And just in IPGPI right now, we have the English speaking day. We also had it back in my school every Wednesday, which all students are encouraged to speak English. But I think it's mainly because of the mindset of the students, because at that time I was around standard 4 or standard 5 with my friends, and I asked them why they don't like speaking English, and mainly it's because to the mindset of them thinking that English is a hard language to speak. I mean, they have no problems doing reading comprehensions or writing, but they prefer not to speak in English because they might say something wrong. But they can speak English, but they're just afraid, and their mindset is it's a hard language to speak.
So I think it is still the environment that affects it, and even worse, if they feel that if they start to speak English, they might be labeled as trying to show off or trying to be, matali or something like that. That is the kind of stigma that people who in those days, today maybe not, because we are exposed to technology, we can listen to how native speakers speaks. But in my time, when you try to speak a bit differently, they will say that, oh, you're trying to be different from others. So then we shy away from trying to speak English. So the environment actually is a big factor there, right? So we just have to rise above that. Sometimes you have to give the motivation to the children, to say that, it doesn't matter if you make mistakes. If you look at the CFR descriptors, it doesn't even mention about grammatical errors. If you are at level 6, it doesn't say that you have to grammatically speak correct sentences, right? So look at the global scale. It's not so much the accuracy, but of course in school we have to teach both accuracy and what's the other term? Accuracy versus it escapes my mind now, but there's always a controversy. Do you want to speak accurately, or fluency, or do you want to speak fluently? So I think in CFR the focus is on communications. So that means fluency is more important, though in Malaysia we try to balance it with accuracy. We don't want you to speak so fluently, but your grammar tunggang-langgang, they say, all upside down. So we must, make sure that you also speak accurately, as well as try to speak fluently. So we give focus to both, right? But don't penalize the child if they make a lot of grammatical mistakes, because you have to fall down before you learn how to walk, right? So the grammar mistakes is part of that process of learning something. So you have to remember that. Okay, so I think there was another question.
Firdaus, are you here? Firdaus? Is Firdaus here? Or has he gone out? Okay, if there's no question, I would like to ask a question because this matter was raised by my ex-students. Okay, they said in the DSKP, it's mentioned that mostly the statement says pupils will be able to answer or speak in familiar context, the word familiar context for the year 3, year 2, right? But the textbook does not support familiar context because it's always it's on not local context. So they found it very difficult to link or to use the textbook for them to practice the skill with the pupils. They have to find other materials outside of the textbook to support local context itself.
Okay, so what's the question?
So why the material does not support the SKP?
Okay. When you say familiar context, I think yes, it would be good if you have local context, but here familiar context, you may bring it one step further by saying that a familiar context can be a situation where the child has been there before, like a beach. it doesn't have to be a beach outside Malaysia, right? But it's still a beach, and it's still familiar because they have been to a beach. So it is now depending on how the teacher interprets that situation, so that what you want at the end of the day is the skill, right? The child can still write, read, can still speak about that activity, even though they are not in that setting, right? Or they are not able to talk about a beach in outside Malaysia, but they are familiar with being at a beach, right? So I mean, this is just an example. So unfortunately, the textbooks at that time, we had to use off-the-shelf textbooks, we call them, meaning that they're not written by our teachers, because we do not have teachers trained in writing CFR level textbooks, meaning that for you to be able to write a textbook that is of the level that we want, the writers have to be very familiar with what constitutes the CFR level, what kind of language they must use, what kind of structures they must use that does not go beyond what the target level is. Meaning that if your target group is for A1, right, they must make the textbook so that it is within the grasp of A1 learners. You can't, it might be a bit difficult for them if you immediately give them a level B, CFR B level book, for example. So they will be struggling with it. So that's why we had to use books which are written not using Malaysian context at that time, but we are in the midst of training teachers on how to write and all that. So hopefully, in future, our teachers are able to write textbooks which when they have already been trained. But we have to look maybe at the descriptors, at the learning standards that's in the framework, and we try to suit it to the context of the book, so that we do not follow strictly to it. We have told our teachers during the training that unfortunately during training we don't have textbooks because it's not ready when we have the induction training. But we do remind them that when they use the textbooks, firstly, it is not written by Malaysian, okay, because that time we don't have experts, and most of the time the context or the setting is always like overseas, because we have to get books which are written by experts, and most of them are outside Malaysia, right? So that is the challenge that we have. But I think now teachers are more familiar how to maneuver the framework now. I think hopefully they are able to not penalize the students if they what they call that, it's the teacher who plays the role in the classroom. Don't penalize the child straight away, because the teacher has to make the environment for the child to learn. All right, so you have to adapt.
Okay, thank you for your explanation. Okay, I think that's the end of the question and answer session. Thanks to everyone who had participated. Ladies and gentlemen, I think before we end this session, can we have a photography session first? Can you all switch on your video so we can take photo? Yeah, switch on your video, please. Quickly, the girls, quickly go and grab your scarf, put on your scarf. The boys, you don't have to put on your scarf, so you can switch on your video straight away.
Oh, now I can see your students. Okay, all right. There are more ladies than men, huh?
Yes, very few boys, men. Okay, men.
Okay, all right.
Okay, are you all ready?
Okay, smile.
1, 2, 3. Okay, one more. 1, 2, okay, 3. All right.
Okay, thank you, Madam Sarah, our photographer. Okay, we have finally come to the last session. That is the closing, and I would like to thank Madam Eileen very, very much in imparting the information to our students. Again, I would like to reiterate, okay, thank you very much, and then for being willing to come, you know, so easily, okay. I mean, I don't have to persuade her or anything. She's willing to share her knowledge. So that is very pleasant, okay. Okay, so let's close this program by reciting tasbih Kifara and Surah Al-As. Okay, so thank you everyone. If in guiding this event I made mistakes, please forgive me. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Take care and stay safe everyone. Madam Aileen, we will post to you your certificate of appreciation. Okay.
Thank you. All the best to